If you have a lot of skin in the game when it comes to these prospects, and maybe you're hedging your bets on prospects, or that's the majority of your portfolio when it comes to the hobby, maybe balance it out a little bit with players that are already proven that could maybe help you take those losses if the market were to crash. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Wax Talk with Raw Mints. I'm Carlos.
And I'm Bruce.
And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about the bubble that everybody else is talking about, the sports card bubble. Is there a bubble? Does it exist? What are our opinions on it? When is it going to burst? Is it even going to burst? We'll just kind of get into that. We're going to talk about that kind of loosely and how we feel about it. But before we get into it, as always, if you could just be sure to subscribe. If you haven't already, rate, review. Most importantly, share this with somebody that you know. Share the podcast with somebody that might benefit from listening to two dudes talk about sports cards every week. We drop a new episode every Monday morning, first thing in the morning. So we try to provide as much useful content to anybody that's new to the hobby or has been in the hobby for a long time. We try to kind of touch on subjects that everybody would be interested in. Also, make sure to follow us on Instagram at Raw Mints. We post daily content there about sports cards, about our own opinion. We share polls that people participate in, and that's where you can find us. That's where you can also reach out to us if you have any questions or suggestions, not only for the podcast, but about the hobby in general. So without further ado, let's get into it, man. So like I said, today's episode is going to be about the bubble, the sports card bubble. How do you feel about that, man? What's your initial, whenever you hear, is there a bubble, what's your initial response?
My initial response is figuring out once that bubble bursts, if it does, what are you left with? What are you comfortable being left with? Everybody talks about it. It's kind of inevitable because there's obviously PSA is on standby right now. I mean, there's just so many people in the hobby right now. You know, there's so many moves being made. So many people are getting into it, willing to spend money on a card, regardless if they know what the actual market value or condition of the card is. So it's just kind of a matter of time when things plateau and when things change up a little bit. For me, like I said, getting into it, it's just, what am I doing when the bubble actually bursts? For me, I'm going to say that I'm just going to make sure that I have cards that I like for my personal collection, my PC, that I'm actually comfortable holding on to, or just, you know, picking up the more well-established players that, you know, aren't going to fluctuate in value as much. Because realistically, I think that when the bubble bursts, it's going to be more of the modern stuff that you see. That's kind of my thing, is just making sure that you hold on to what you think is going to pan out more for a long-term strategy, or just something that I'm comfortable holding on to regardless of what the value is. What's the first initial thing that you think of?
The first thing that I think of is, sorry, just start crying.
I don't want the bubble to burst.
The first thing that I think of whenever people are talking about a bubble are goats. That's just the first thought that comes to my mind. Goats. The LeBrons, the MJs, the Messis, the Ronaldos, the Mike Trouts, the Tatis. I mean, not even Tatis yet. He hasn't become a GOAT in my opinion, but he's next up. You know, he's the new face of the league. The LeBrons, the Steph Currys, first ballot Hall of Famers. These are the Tom Brady's of the world, the Drew Brees
goats,
of the world.
You mean the greats of all time, or the greats of our time, you know, whatever you're placing your bets on that way.
Yeah, dude, the goats, man. That's kind of the first thing that comes to mind when it comes to the bubble, is goats. And who do I have? Have I been investing in these players? The goats, in my opinion, are the players or the cards that are going to stand the test of time, that are going to weather the storm, that if the market does crash tomorrow, whose cards are going to hold the most value. Even if, okay, so let's say, for instance, that the market crashes tomorrow morning, okay? And immediately card values just take a dive. Which cards do you think are going to take the biggest hit if the market crashed tomorrow morning?
I think it's going to be a lot of the modern stuff because there's so much product out there, you know? I mean, even saying, dare I say, Prism Luca rookies or Prism Zion rookies, you know, I feel like that, which are still great cards to pick up and possibly hold long term or flip now, obviously, but I feel like these cards are going to be affected greatly. For me, it just comes back to like, I'll have an older card, like an older vintage baseball card, and I don't see that card going anywhere. If anything, to me, it's going to be a player that someday gets more recognized for whatever reason, and you know, it's going to increase the popularity that way. Or there's a bunch of other people out there who do the same thing.
Right. And the overall reason why I say GOATs right off the bat is there's so many players right now, like you just mentioned, Luka, Zion, there's Tatis, Acuna, there's Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, all of these ultra modern players, they haven't proven themselves yet. They haven't won a championship. They haven't made a huge playoff run. Yeah, they put up numbers. They have highlight reels, no doubt. And Zion has dunk after dunk that is just posterizing people. Luka has game-winning shots almost on a weekly basis. But to me, right now, as it stands, that's not enough. That's not enough for me to hedge my bets into those players if the market were to crash tomorrow. And that's who I'd be stuck with. That's just my opinion. And people can disagree with me. People can agree with me. But I just think that these players haven't proven themselves yet. And if you do believe that there is a bubble, I think that's a mindset that you need to take into consideration. That's kind of the mindset that you should probably shift to if you are worried about a bubble. If you are one of those people that's just investing for flips, if you're not a collector, if you're not somebody that's just, you know, building your PC, you know, if you are somebody that's investing, which there's nothing wrong with, dude. We make a lot of money on cards, and we have over the past year and a half or so, because of investing, because of flipping. But I think that if there is a bubble or a correction even, there's no way that the prices of, you know, the Lukas, the Zions of base cards, there's no way that those cards should be more expensive than Hall of Famers that have proven themselves, that have championship rings, like Steph Curry's or LeBron James. Like these first ballot Hall of Famers, there's no reason why their base Prism rookie card should be more than a decent graded card of LeBron or Steph, you know?
Yeah, and it just makes people have a more, you know, specific approach to it. Because, I mean, we talked about how many Prism, Luka, and Zions there are, but like the way I look at it is two things. If the bubble bursts, take a 1997-98 Topps base Tim Duncan rookie, there's a lot of them out there, you know, but you can still probably get a 9 at a reasonable price, you know, maybe the 150, 160 range. You know, he's about to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, and he is one of those GOATs, one of those players that his market has rised a little bit, but compared to other guys, especially some of the greats of the game, I mean, he's just one of those guys to me that I feel like if the bubble bursts, I still want a Tim Duncan rookie in my PC.
Just for that example alone, dude, you just mentioned the price. They're going for what? The PSA 9 of his rookie cards are going for what? 160, $170?
Yeah, depending on the grading label, and even 10s. I mean, Topps Chrome rookies, 10s and the refractors and stuff, I mean, they're a super high premium.
Right,
but,
right.
I mean, getting in on small cards like that, you know, I mean, one of my favorites is the Fleer Ultra card of that set, you know, which is also really condition sensitive. But I mean, probably finding a PSA 9 from the right buyer around the same price, I mean, it's just like, it makes more sense.
It's a no-brainer if that's the cost of the Tim Duncan, who has rings, who is one of the best players of all time. He'll be an inductee into the Hall of Fame, and he's proven himself. His rookie card, even a Fleer Ultra, which I think is one of the top cards of that time, going for one, even say 200, a PSA 9. And the same Luka Prism base card, PSA 9, is going for like $400, $500. Like, how does that make any sense?
Well, for that price, you might even be able to get in, like we're speaking on a budget as far as that we're comfortable with PSA 9s, you know, especially speaking back to 1997, 98 Tim Duncan rookie. I mean, it's a lot harder to get if you buy them raw, you're taking a huge gamble. It's not going to be pristine for the most part. So being able to spend that money, I mean, even going in on a PSA 10, I mean, you're not only going to see a price increase, but you're literally going to be holding a player that's one of the greats of NBA in general.
And he's already retired. He's already going to, I mean, he's eventually going to be inducted to the Hall of Fame, like he is going to be there. He's proven himself. He has rings. He has championships. The Spurs domination of that era was insane, dude. They were so good. And Tim Duncan was a huge factor in each of those rings, each of those championships.
People are picking him up right now, but I mean that's just a tip too. I mean, because obviously we know, I mean, coming soon he's going to be inducted in the Hall of Fame, as well as Kobe Bryant. It's just going to be, the bubble's not going to burst like quite yet. I mean, there's going to be a lot of hype. Like if you think Kobe prices are high right now, I mean, they're going to hit a next level for at least a short time.
Right. But to finish that point, Tim Duncan's a player that's huge. I never personally liked Tim Duncan because he played for the Spurs and was one of our main enemies as a Suns fan.
Always beating the Suns, yeah.
But huge respect to him and what him, Tony Parker, and Ginobili were able to do in their time with the Spurs. That was like one of the really huge, dominant dynasties of that time period. And that's already done. It's already sealed. It's already sealed in the hobby. Luka, I don't want this to happen. Trust me, I don't want it to happen. I would never wish anything negative on any player or their cards, but Luka could get hurt tomorrow, dude, and never play again.
Yeah, anybody can. And it's like, it's very different with LeBron because people love him, people hate him. As far as picking him up right now, I mean, he got injured recently. I mean, if it was an injury that just kind of ended him completely, he still has all those stats in front of him.
Right, he has all those rings.
He's already been established as a GOAT, as one of the best players, whereas opposed to Luka, God forbid, has a NBA career-ending injury. He had great potential. He racked up some numbers, but at the same time, he didn't fully reach his potential.
Right. And I mean, that's 2018. That's 3 years ago. LaMelo Ball got injured this year. I know that we speak negatively as far as the hobby goes and the overinflation of his pricing.
Yeah, it's just overpriced. It's nothing against LaMelo Ball. I mean,
no,
he has
nothing
potential,
at all.
But it's
He's a
just
baller.
The prices of his cards. It's just like outrageous.
It's outrageous, man. And those kind of leading into the next kind of subtopic I wanted to cover is what would be the cause of a bubble? And that's a perfect transition, man. Overinflated pricing of somebody like LaMelo Ball. Yes, he's good. He's a great player. He's definitely the best ball in my opinion so far already. But he got hurt and the products are still coming out and his prices are still going to be huge. Prism just dropped and his prices are still so damn high. And it's this hype culture, these hype collectors. I want to blame it on new, inexperienced collectors, but there's still a lot of people that we know that are picking up LaMelo Ball, that are paying these high prices, paying these high premiums to pay for sealed product, hobby boxes, and all of these things, paying high dollar to chase LaMelo Ball.
It's fun, it's cool, it's easy, but when you've been collecting for a while, it's just different. You can't hate on it. I mean, you just kind of like, you enjoy it, and if you're able to pull LaMelo Ball out of packs yourself, whatever, it's still enjoyable. It's the hype kind of overshadows everything, but at the end of the day, once that fades away, once the bubble pops, it's just kind of what are you left with? Every draft class, there's such great talent, so it's hard not to hype. That's why I never can see the bubble completely popping as far as the hype for sports, current sports. But at the same time, I mean, whether the prices reflect that hype is something to be determined. It's just hard for us, I know, to just see it continuing on this way. I mean, if it does, that's fine. We're enjoying it. But at the same time, I mean, I feel like it's bound to change up at some point.
A few of the leading factors to back people that claim that there is a bubble, I think that the facts, not even the facts, but kind of what's going on to cause the bubble that people can use as evidence or proof to a bubble is overpopulation of cards, so high pop reports, so high number of graded, usually base cards. Like there's 20,000 Zion base Prisms, PSA 10s. There's pretty similar numbers when it comes to Ronald Acuna Jr.'s flagship rookie card. there's just so much overgrading with these base cards, these non-rare, non-parallel cards. And Acuna, I know you're a huge fan of Acuna. He's a baller. He's hitting bombs. I think he's right up there with Tatis, in my opinion, as far as talent goes. But again, these are all still players that haven't reached the greatness that is bubble proof. Which again, nothing's really bubble proof, but there are some players that you could really say close to bubble proof. Another factor, in my opinion, is the price of sealed product. It's just so high. It's too much. It's too high, dude. I mean, even in the short time that I've been in the hobby, we've seen 300, 400, 700x the original cost or the price of the same product in years prior. You made that example in one of our previous episodes where you purchased a 2018 Prism hobby box when it first came out for $400, and now those exact same hobby boxes, nothing's changed, it's the exact same product, those are going for $7,500.
It just takes away of the fun of the hobby, because it's like, okay, if you're going to get into wax, even over singles, to be honest, I mean, the hottest thing is sealed wax. Everybody wants sealed wax. So you spend all this money, thousands of dollars on a product, you keep it sealed, it's probably going to improve in value overall, but at the same time, it's like, it just takes the fun out of it. It's like, why are you doing it? For us, like, I can't see us spending that kind of money and not expecting some type of return, like, you know what I mean? Whether it be getting players that we like or selling, making profits. I mean, it's just kind of like that long-term hold is cool. It makes sense. But at the same time, as collectors, it just takes away from the fun aspect of it in the hobby.
So I've got a question for you. With our topic today of is there a bubble and do we believe that there is a correction coming or a crash coming? And if you were one of those people that invested in sealed product hoping for it to appreciate in value and just continue to climb up, make that $400 to $7,500 leap, if you think that it's going to continue to rise. If I gave you $7,500 and you had to choose, okay, you could either get a sealed hobby box of 2018 Prism, or you could get a PSA 10 silver Luka Doncic. Which one would you choose?
As a collector, that is a very tough question, especially when you're trying to use your money wisely with how crazy the market is. But for me, it's hard as a collector, because I don't think I'd be able to hold a sealed box that long. I would want to open it. But again, that would realistically depend on what I was in on the box for to begin with. But for me, I'd probably take a gamble on a Prism Silver Luka rookie.
PSA 10.
Even though we're talking about the bubble popping, whatever, that's kind of something that I would just like to have because I've always wanted one. But that's kind of the gamble that I would take that way.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard as a collector. It's really hard to answer these questions because there's a lot of things I can think of to do with $7,500, even outside of cards. But even realistically, if I wanted to spend like a small portion of that, I mean, I just go back to thinking like I have a 55 Topps Roberto Clemente rookie raw, which I think is in decent condition, but I could still get probably an authentic copy, a 1 to a 3 for cheaper than that. And then when that bubble crashes, like I have that card, you know what I mean? And I feel like that's what's going to improve value.
That's kind of the point that I wanted to make, man. I mean, we've talked previously that say that you either chose the box or you chose the graded PSA 10 silver Luka and the market crashes, right? You could panic and then say that you're forced to make a profit, okay, after the market crashes. You could open up that hobby box and not even pull a Luka silver. You could not even pull a Luka at all. Because if the market crashed and you were stuck with that $7,500 bill for that hobby box and it dropped to $3,000 or it dropped to $1,000 in value once the market crashed, you would probably be panicking, and you'd probably open it up to see like, okay, maybe I have a 1-of-1 Luka in there. Maybe I have a 1-of-1 Trae Young in there. So you could open it up. You could not even pull a Luka or a Trae, or you could pull a silver Luka and it have an effed up corner. That's kind of my justification for choosing. I think I back your decision to pick up the graded PSA 10 silver, Because yeah, there could be a 1-to-1 Luka in there. There could be a Luka silver auto in there.
Yeah, it could be the gold, the gold 10. I mean, you could have a hot
Exactly.
box that has a gold Trey Young and a silver Luka. But then again, you don't know if the condition's going to be
Right.
good enough, But as we've talked about before, it's like if you're willing to spend a certain amount of money on a product because you like 2018 Prism or whatever, I mean, who are you chasing? If you're chasing Miles Bridges out of that, I mean, why don't you just spend a small portion and just buy that card already graded, ready to go, and you're good. You're still saving money that way.
Or DeAndre Ayton. Like, yeah,
There's a lot of good plays in every draft class in general. I mean, before you think about spending the money on wax to pull these players, I mean, just look at their market value, because obviously if you're chasing Luka, the prices are going to be high, but review the other players in the draft class and just know what your potential is that way. You know what I mean? Because if the price is right and you can get a box and chase these players and enjoy the fun of it, then that's cool. But most of the time, like it's very hard to find things that are reasonably priced. You might as well just go for these players straight up.
even to take that example further, dude, what happens if PSA just says, look, guys, we had a great run. We are so glad to have serviced the hobby for all of these years and to have been a huge part of the hobby. But with the amount of orders that we get on a daily basis and how backlogged we get, we don't have the funds or the ability to continue to grade cards. What if PSA just said we can't do it anymore? We have to shut down our doors, and BGS shut down their doors. Like, what if you couldn't grade cards anymore and you had that hobby box or the PSA 10 graded card? Which one do you think, if grading companies just fell off the face of the earth, which of those two choices do you think would hold more value?
I don't know. I don't see that happening at all. But yeah, that's kind of what you think about, is it's like whether it's PSA, BGS, whatever, like if those companies just cease even for whatever amount of time, even with PSA, I mean, people are still going to be like, what do you do? I can't grade cards of PSA. I always like PSA, the holder, everything. The market's going to rise on PSA graded cards in
Right.
general, or whatever. I mean, whatever product it is. I mean, you would see an increase because of that. I don't see that happening. But even with PSA right now, it's like people are willing to spend a crazy amount of money to grade cards still, because they still hold,
Right.
that a few expensive services that way.
But if they close their doors and you can no longer grade cards, what value does that hobby box really have? Even if you pull a silver Luca and it's in pristine condition, is it going to hold the same value as an already graded PSA 10 Luca Silver?
Worst comes to worst, to me, it just brings me back to a time when grading didn't exist. So you really have to just know your stuff that way, especially when dealing with people trading and selling. I mean, that's how it should be anyway. If you have raw cards, obviously they're going to sell for a cheaper value than graded, but at the same time, you got to know your condition on that kind of stuff, especially with vintage. A lot of people don't want vintage stuff graded. So, and you may find that too when you get into picking up vintage cards and just liking them, the card as it is. I mean, that's a different story as well. But yeah, it's hard to say, man. I mean, it just really depends on how you're trying to collect, or what you're anticipating to happen with the market, because if you're always hoping it's never going to end or the bubble's never going to pop, I mean, it's going to at least pop on players. It's going to pop on certain products. I mean, that's something that you can guarantee. It's just how hyped up can the modern continue to grow before it does pop.
The reason why I asked you those questions and I wanted to know your opinion is that's kind of the question I pose to everybody else in the hobby, whether you're brand new to collecting or you've been doing it forever or longer than Bruce has or longer than we have. That's the questions that I want people to be asking themselves. If there is a bubble, if there are worries of the market crashing, and you haven't asked yourself these types of questions, or you haven't taken the time to think about things like this or evaluate what's happening in the hobby and what's causing people to talk about a bubble, it might be time to shift your mindset. It might be time, we're never going to tell you what to do in the hobby, but we're going to offer our opinions, and we're going to share what we're doing.
We encourage people to appreciate the cards, because if grading companies cease and You don't have that aspect, or because of the bubble bursting, graded cards don't hold the same value that they do. I mean, it's really about appreciating the cards that you have, and knowing their value, because whether it's sentimental, monetary, whatever, I mean, it's like if you know your card, you know what you have, you know the rarity of it, you know the caliber of the player, then that's really all that matters. And other people that are into collecting cards, they'll understand that, they'll respect it.
If you haven't already, it might be time to just reevaluate where you stand in the hobby. I know that we have lately. I know that we've kind of changed our strategy of prospecting versus picking up goats, and we've been leaning more towards picking up goats. We've been shifting our investing strategy as well as just our opinion on the hobby is what am I collecting? Why am I collecting this? Why am I picking these cards up? Is it a player that I've followed since I was a kid? Is this a player that I really enjoy? Is this a team that I really enjoy? Or is this a player that if the market were to crash tomorrow, who's going to hold the most value? Is a
Yeah.
Messi card going to hold more value than Holland? I know that Holland is getting a lot of hype and a lot of well-deserved hype in my opinion. He's really good. He's setting records at his young age. He's on pace to be a Messi or Ronaldo. But if the hobby crashed tomorrow, he never got that chance to go that far. He never got the opportunity to become a Messi or Ronaldo.
Yeah, and as long as you're appreciating the players of the cards, even if the bubble bursts, your bubble won't, because you'll still be able to appreciate the cards for what they mean to you. That's the biggest thing, is knowing that your cards are worth value and have the potential of continuing to grow in value is a really great thing. It's a great investment strategy, but at the same time, like, if you don't have any sort of attachment to it, in our personal opinion, I mean, a lot of people don't have attachment to the cards that they sell, that's fine, but in our personal opinion, just being able to appreciate the cards that you have, and really knowing their worth outside of just the dollar bill sign, that's the approach that we take to it, is being able to enjoy the card for whatever reason, whether it's the player, the photography, the set, the variant, whatever. I mean, those things are important to collectors.
Right. And I think that's something that you can apply to anybody can apply to how they collect or who they collect, if it is true that there is a bubble, which me personally, I don't think that the market's going to completely crash. I think that one of the main ways that it could crash is if there was a overall economic failure in not only the US but worldwide. If there was a global economic crisis, obviously this is a hobby at the end of the day. There's a lot of people that do this full time as a job, but those people would be out of work. Even if you had a huge PC that was that had a very high value on it, who's going to be spending the money at that time on giving you what you think your card is worth? Nobody is. If there are bigger problems in the world than people can afford, I think people would be spending their money trying to survive or pay their rent, or hopefully if they're smart enough to pay their rent before they buy a new card.
So do you see the bubble primarily affecting what we call the flippers, like people who are just buying like even retail products and flipping it? I mean, do you see, if this bubble bursts, I mean, don't you think that it's going to make a big impact on people that are just in it to go to hit up Walmarts and Targets, buy product and flip it right away? I mean, does that make sense? Do you see that at all?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, there wouldn't, if the value of the sealed products that they are literally waiting and camping outside of Targets and Walmarts across the country, waiting to pick up, even to just get one blast. If you're waiting in line or out in the cold for 5-6 hours of your day every day to hopefully get a blaster of a product that you're able to sell for $200, like, that's a lot of wasted time, unless you have that kind of time. Like,
I mean, that's a flip. We were looking at the new Select that came out, and they're $20 a blaster, and realistically, they're like around $120. So, all in all, you're making like $100 on a $20 blaster, which seems cool. But once that bubble pops, it's like I just don't see that existing. For whatever that means, we don't know.
The values aren't going to be there.
Yeah, we don't know, but
I think that those retail flippers will get hit the hardest. I also think that breakers will get group breakers will get hit pretty hard, because if the market crashed, because there wouldn't be people spending that money on breaking, which we have friends that are breakers. We have people that we're really close with that are breakers that we respect and that we've worked with and partnered with. Shout out to Phantom Cards. They've been one of our best partners and friends actually in the hobby when it comes to social since we started Raw Mints. And I just would hate for if the market to crash and say that they just, made a purchase of buying cases of Select or cases of a product that's at the astronomical prices that they're at right now, and they just are stuck with that sealed product.
And what if on a positive, like say in a perfect world, on a positive note, what if this impacts the retail hobby way in such a way that it goes back to more normalized prices where, okay, say people still want to get in on box breaks and they don't want to spend the money on a hobby box. It's still spending 20 to 50 bucks as opposed to spending 150 to 350 a box. That's thinking in a perfect world, going back to how it used to be, you know what I mean? Where everybody's able to make money, people that are distributing or retail sellers, whatever it may be. I mean, it could be impactful in a positive way. It could make things more obtainable for people that just want to get into sports, or they like sports and they want to get into the hobby. That's just me, wishful thinking, just remembering how it used to be.
Right. Like being able to pick up product for their retail price or even
a decent price, even for a hobby box, man. I mean, I just miss the days of picking up Bowman baseball, or a jumbo box at a reasonable price, because you're pulling stuff that you're going to sit on and it's going to increase in value, or players are going to be called up or pan out or whatever. But it just makes it hard. It's like every price that you're introduced to anymore, it's just like, why is this price so high? Oh, it's because of this player. So, and it just puts a bad taste in my mouth, because then I'm just focused on chasing that player, when there's so many other great players in all sports that will pan out or that may not pan out, but at least you're getting more of a collection of the set and the players.
The way I see it, and I've talked with other collectors on IG and other people that we're close to when it comes to the bubble. And the way that I see it is, if kids today are not able to, one, afford the price of even a retail box, especially a hobby box, if they're not able to afford the prices of getting a box of product, they're not going to have any interest in opening product, right? Like there's going to be interest lost of this current kids these days, right? The current generation of kids that are looking to get into the hobby. It's not going to be available to them. It's not going to be obtainable if you don't have the money, or if you aren't able to skip school and wait in the morning at a Target or Walmart to be able to get your hands on some product.
It also just introduces kids in a backwards way of collecting too, though,
right.
Because again, it's just like they understand how hard it is to get these products, and at the same time, what are they focusing on when they do get these products? They're focused on pulling the freaking the biggest card, and it's just
or flipping.
Yeah, and it makes you ignore like what you're really doing this for.
Right. And I just think that, okay, if there isn't a bubble, if there isn't a market crash coming anytime soon, I think that the sustainability of the hobby is in jeopardy right now, because if kids these days aren't able to get their hands on product at a reasonable price or even afford it, what's going to happen in 8 to 10 years time? If there's a huge time period of kids not being able to even get into collecting or get into the hobby, 8 to 10 years from now, there might not be as many people even interested in the hobby, because they were never able to get in at a reasonable time or a reasonable price because of the astronomical prices of product, like that's something. Yeah. The sustainability of it is in jeopardy because of that reason alone. And I've brought this point up to other collectors, and I've gotten a similar response from people where they've said, I'm interested in it now. Like like people are getting older and they're able to buy cards and buy singles or players that they like now that they may not have been able to pick up when they were kids. But when they were kids, they were able to pick up cards. They were able to collect as kids. So I personally don't think that's a really valid point to make, because if you didn't even have the interest in general as a child, I think that your odds of gaining interest are low when you get older, because you don't have that nostalgia. Like whenever I was a kid, I wasn't a collector as a kid, but I had friends that collected. I knew people that collected, so it was in my orbit, but I'm a different person. Like I just think that the odds of the sustainability long term are in jeopardy right now, in my opinion.
One thing to keep in mind is even before the hype of the market, the bubble thought process, whatever, just thinking beforehand, it's always been easy for people to get turned off from cards. And now more than ever, because of the prices, people don't want to pay crazy amounts of prices for cards. But at the same time, even back then, if I spent $15 to $20 on a Randy Moss rookie back in the day, and I showed that to a friend, and they're like, "Oh, it's a cool card. Would you pay for it?" And I told them, they're like, "You spent that much on a card?" But it's just one of those things that you have to be willing to spend a little bit of money. Now it seems like you have to spend a lot of money, but at the same time, there's still ways to get in. Whether the bubble crashes or not, as long as you're picking up the players that you are emotionally attached to or just appreciate in some way, that value is going to outweigh whatever happens in the future.
And we've said this many times on podcasts: collect what you love, collect who you love, and you won't go wrong. And I think that should be at the core of what you plan to do in the hobby, and you can definitely save yourself from a lot of loss. But the caveat to that is, yeah, collect who you love, collect what you love, and you won't go wrong. But if what you love or who you love is ridiculously overpriced, like,
yeah, sometimes that happens.
you could end up getting burned and have a bad taste in your mouth for the hobby because you were the number one diehard LaMelo Ball collector and you paid way, way too much for his cards or his graded cards, and now you're just kind of at a loss if the market were to crash. I don't think that we have a cut and dry opinion on the bubble, if there even is one. I don't think that we have enough data or information to come to a conclusion with that. We do both feel, I think, that a market correction is in order soon, with all of the examples that we brought up in this episode of pricing, overpriced product, or even overproduced product, overgraded base cards, and really high pop reports. I think that those are all signs that could point towards a market correction. But for now, like we've said before, and we will continue to move and operate our own investing strategy and our own way that we pick up cards, is collecting for our PC or investing in goats. It's a smart idea, whether you believe there's a bubble or not, to take a step back and at least ask yourself those questions that we posed in this episode. Ask yourself, what am I okay with being stuck with if the market crashed when I woke up tomorrow? Am I investing in too many prospects? Am I rolling the dice on too many ultra modern cards of players that are unproven? If you are, that's fine. Obviously, collect what you love. If that's what you want to do, if that's your goal, then by all means. But if you have a lot of skin in the game when it comes to these prospects, and maybe you're hedging your bets on prospects, or that's the majority of your portfolio when it comes to the hobby, maybe balance it out a little bit with players that are already proven that could maybe help you take those losses if the market were to crash. All right, so our Ask the Hobby section, our question of the week is for a fellow collector on Instagram. His name's Giancarlo, and his Instagram handle is Raw Collector VB. So it's Raw Collector, and then the letter V and the letter B. He's a really cool dude. He has quite a bit of vintage Raw cards. He also collects Marvel cards. He's a returning collector, so we had a question for him to be answered. So this is the question that we asked. With the hobby being way different than it has been in the past, as a returning collector to the hobby, what is your strategy for getting back into collecting? Are you continuing where you left off when you stopped collecting with older products, or are you picking up more modern cards? And this is what he had to say.
What's going on, Carlos and Bruce? First and foremost, many thanks for having me on the pod. Yeah, to go right into it to answer your question. Yeah, as a returning collector of basketball cards, after being out of it for about 23 years, I have the same approach towards the hobby today as I did back in '97 when I was just 12 years old. And basically that's yeah, to just to collect who I like. I know you guys are a firm believer in that, but yeah, of course there's the investment aspect to it now that I'm older, and I'm a huge fan of the NBA, and the hobby is just an extension of that for me. So, but yeah, there's definitely an appeal towards modern cards. I do find myself gravitating towards older products like Fleer Metal, Topps Chrome, Upper Deck, Skybox. Those are the cards I owned of, MJ, Shaq. They were my original PC. I guess you can see nostalgia plays a huge part in that, and I definitely consider myself a fan of old school hoops. But yeah, growing up in the '90s, like I said, I loved MJ and Shaq, so I collected their cards. After MJ retired, then I just naturally gravitated towards the Lakers, especially when Kobe came into the league. And I've been following the league very closely since then. And then eventually became a D Wade fan when he came into the mix. But I did stop collecting around '99, 2000. So I have no Kobe in my PC or any players during that time. No, even not even D Wade, unfortunately. So, but yeah, since getting back into the hobby, did find myself browsing through an entire collection of 65-cent D Wade and Shaq cards on Beckett Marketplace. But yeah, so far the only really good cards I've purchased are Zion's, Donruss base, and Dial Heroes Hoops base. So anyway, here's my play in a nutshell. Eventually, I'm gonna start flipping raw cards on eBay to start building small profits. Eventually, work my way up to higher end cards, and also gonna start grinding at my LCS. Attend monthly card shows here at home. I live in Virginia, Virginia Beach, by the way, Virginia. Shout out 757. And just shop, $1, $5 singles. Very excited to showcase more of my collection on Instagram as well. As a creative and former wedding and portrait photographer, I actually want to combine my love for photography and cards and hopefully be able to share that to the cardboard community in a unique way and tell a story through my collection. But yeah, essentially, just consider myself a collector first, investor second, and to wrap up my answer, I want to post a question back to you guys. What are your thoughts about buying raw, selling raw? With today's market and grading services being temporarily out of reach, raw seems like the best play right now, short term. So, what are your thoughts on that?
So he has the perfect approach to this whole thing, mainly because you can tell that he's a true collector. He's been doing this for a long time, or at least did it back when he was younger, now getting back into it. Raw cards are a move right now, especially before we even talk about the bubble bursting or anything. Right now, if you pull something that's a fresh product, it's raw, you want to make some money, you can flip that right away. Nobody cares because those people are trying to pick up this card and get it graded themselves. They're worrying about that on their own end. But it's just cool to see, more people reach out that way and let us know that they collect because of where they grew up or whatever. They collect certain players and players that may not even have a super high value, but being able to have these regardless is really what's going to fit into your personal collection. I think the idea of selling modern players right now is a good move because it allows you to spend the money on what you really want. Whether it's working your way up towards a higher end card or just picking up an accumulation of a player that you like at a fraction of the price. Everything he said speaks to me because you just get the vibe that he's been collecting. He understands the hobby. He's getting back into it. And even if you've been in the hobby before and you jump into it now, it's very overwhelming, but you still have that common ground of what you're doing to begin with.
Again, thank you for answering our question of the week. Like you said, dude, he really does touch a lot of things that we are doing as well. And our value, like you said, you can definitely tell that he is a real collector, a true collector. At least he has the true collecting, I guess you could say, mantra at heart, which is collecting who you love. That's something that we really respect and we can identify with. But as far as his response goes, I think that he made really good points as a returning collector. I think that's a very valuable opinion that a lot of people should know about, is returning to the hobby after what it used to be. And like you said, it's overwhelming now. But I think that his idea to sell these lower end or smaller cards and building up to a bigger card that he wants or that he's after, I think that's a really cool journey and strategy to do. I think that's another topic that we could probably have a full episode on, is selling smaller cards in order to pick up a PC card or a big card that you really want. I think that he's got the right idea in mind. I think that he's got the respect and love for the hobby that I think maybe new people or flippers might be lacking, that insight. But I think that even attributing his ideas to what our episode has been about, which was the bubble, I think that he's got the right idea in mind. If he's collecting players that he used to really like D Wade, and trying to pick up some Kobe's, I think that that's a pretty cool strategy for returning collectors to just kind of pick up where he left off. I think that if I hope that he's able to pick up some D Wades that he always wanted, because I mean, compared to a Zion or a Luka or a Jason Tatum cards, I think that you could probably get something really decent of Dwayne Wade these days.
Yeah, and bottom line is he's having fun while he does it. And that's what we do too in the hobby. It's cool making money, but at the same time, I mean, we want to enjoy what we're actually picking up, what we're collecting, what we're holding. I mean, that's what it's about.
And to answer his question, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, is the raw card market. How is that being affected right now with PSA being shut down as far as grading goes? I think, like you said, the raw card market is a play. It's in play, dude, especially with the new products that are coming out, the new football, the new basketball products that are dropping. It's not a bad idea to open up, because there is still a lot of hype. There's a lot of people that are still doing what we're doing and building up a submission to send off whenever PSA opens right up. So there is a market. There is definitely a need. There's a demand for people to rip products and do the hunting for them. People are paying a premium to avoid having to wait online for retail boxes or paying high dollar prices for hobby boxes when they could just pick up that single from you if you ripped it. So thanks again, Giancarlo, for that response. We really appreciate you taking the time to answer our Ask the Hobby question of the week. Now let's get into our pickups and flips of the week, man. What would be your pickup of the week, would you say?
My pickup of the week would be first year Prism 2012 Prism football, Drew Brees SGC 9 in a newer label. But still, this card was around $35. In comparison to the same grade, even say a PSA 9 Tom Brady is probably between $200 and $300. Drew Brees has always been one of my favorites, so like picking up him for that cheap is definitely a no-brainer. Something that I'll just hold, whether it improves in value or not. That's just something to hold long term.
As far as my pickup of the week goes, I've been taking advantage of the Trae Young dip in prices right now. I picked up a 2018 Panini Status PSA 10 rookie card. That's card number 142. I love the design of Status, dude. It's one of my favorite big products because of the colors, the photography. I think it looks super sick, especially that 2018 release. I really like the way it looks. It kind of looks like it's liquidy a little bit. I love the design. So I picked that up for $120, which I don't think that's a bad price for a PSA 10 of Trae Young.
Yeah, and Status, which I'm sure isn't an easy PSA 10.
It's not, man. It's very condition sensitive for sure, especially with the kind of like the foil aspect to it. But yeah, that's my pickup of the week. What about your flip?
Staying with the 2012 Prism was a 2012 Prism Tom Brady card. First year Tom Brady Prism. Keep in mind that this is a raw card that sold for $130. So it's one of those things that wasn't in the best condition, wasn't something that we reviewed, thought that needed to be graded. Still a great card for any collector, especially with the hype of Prism, first year Brady. But yeah, sold for $130, and something that I had pulled back in the day from the only 2012 Prism football box that I opened, which I don't remember the price on it back then, but was nowhere near what it is now.
Right. Right, dude.
For sure. What about you?
My flip of the week is I picked this card up I've actually picked up two of them for $120 at the time. So $60 a pop. I sold a 2010 TriStar OBAC. It's the National VIP Mini Mike Trout rookie cards. It's actually a BGS 9.5. The subgrades were really good on it. I sold that for $130. So I covered the cost of both of the cards that I picked up at the time and made $10 off of it. And I have one that I'm holding extra long term. That's another one of the investment strategies that I've practiced and I've had success with, is buying multiples of the same card. That way you can flip one whenever and hopefully cover the cost of buying both. And this is an example of me doing that. And that's my only Mike Trout rookie that I own. And so that's going to be a ultra long-term hold for me. So those are our pickups and flips of the week. All right, Bruce. So what do you think? Do you think that we covered the bubble topic? I know that we could probably talk for another hour about the bubble and even get into the Gary V versus Vegas Dave debate. I know that there's people that have their own opinions of that situation. We don't really like to be too negative and at least make things personal about people or influencers of the hobby. So we kind of try to stay away from that type of stuff. But they both have made really good points in the past, and they both are pretty responsible for influencing a lot of people. We try to do our best to influence as positively as we can and offer not so much advice. We don't ever really want to say that we're giving advice, but just kind of share what we're doing. And if it's something that kind of aligns with what you believe in or maybe how you move, and especially with our Ask the Hobby guest of the week, shout out to Raw Collector VB. Even with his own response to our question, it kind of shows that there are other collectors that are moving how we are, and that's collecting what you love.
Yeah, and I think realistically, what we're just trying to get at is to invest outside of the hype. There's a lot of really good leaders in the community in general they can only lead you to whatever point they're trying to make with a certain player or a product or whatever. But just because somebody tells you that a certain player his prices have dropped or that he's not going anywhere, if you like that player, you like that team, and you pick up that player, then that's perfectly fine. I mean, that's kind of the hobby aspect that we're shooting for, is just avoid the hype. It's fun to be in it in the moment, but at the same time, if there's a player that somebody's telling you isn't going to pan out and you still have a good feeling about them, then pick them up, because that's really what it's about, is enjoying who you're picking up, who you're collecting.
Take advantage of those off-season dips. Take advantage of any sort of price dips during the season. If you do believe in these players, if you think that, the market's so volatile these days, and that might be another factor of why people are worried about a bubble, is the volatility of the market. But if there's volatility, it's just like trading stocks. You buy low, sell high, if that's what you're in it to, if you're in it for investing and flipping. But if you're in it to PC, or if you're picking up cards because you really like the design or the player or the team, might as well buy low when you can. I think that pretty much wraps up this week's episode. I really hope that maybe you have your own opinion of the bubble and if there is one or not. If you want to reach out to us with your own opinion, we would love to hear from you. You can message us on Instagram at Raw Mints. Be sure to follow us there too. We'll definitely respond, and we love. That's another thing about the hobby that I don't think a lot of people talk about, and I know that we should probably have an episode on it, is talking cards. That's probably my favorite thing to do.
The community that surrounds the people that are collectors, that we love to trade people, and them get a card of someone that they've been trying to pick up, and in return we get the player that we've been trying to pick up. It's all about figuring out how to enjoy the community, with all the craziness of the market just at its core.
I think that's kind of what our podcast goals are, just to talk cards, man. I think that's why we really enjoy doing it so much. But we really hope that the information that we shared today helped you out and maybe realigned your opinion on the hobby if you do believe there is a bubble or if you're worried about it. It's about just shifting your mindset, man. You got to adapt, just like with anything in life. We just want to be able to be a resource and hopefully provide information that'll help you form a different mindset or opinion on where things are going. But as always, please be sure to subscribe, rate, review if you can. Share this with somebody that might be interested in two dudes talking ad nauseum about cards. That's what we do. That's what we love to do. We enjoy doing this podcast, and we want to continue providing that for you all. We're going to be here no matter what. Even if the market crashed, I think that we still have so much that we could still talk about, even if the market crashed today. So this has been another episode of Wax Talk with Raw Mint. I'm Carlos.
And I'm Bruce.
Thank you for listening.